What up YouTube, it's Alex and I'm back at it again for yet another video. So today we will be starting our journey into the MCU, and that will all start with the very first movie, Captain America, the First Avenger. So even though it is not technically the very first movie that was released from the MCU, if you go through timeline-wise like I do, it actually does fall to be number one, since it does take place during World War II. And so, as I said in my previous video, the way that I will be making these videos, it will be going in order of what I watch, and, well, how I watch them. It may not be the same way you guys watch them, and you know what, that's totally fine. If you think that I'm doing them incorrectly, and you think, hey, I have a better way of watching them, leave it in the comments down below saying I have a totally better way of watching it. Yours is just really bad. So, as I said in my previous video too, we will be starting to break down all 23 Marvel movies, and so we will be starting with Captain America, the First Avenger, breaking it all down, telling you what did you miss, and all that good stuff. So, let's get started. And also, first off, I've had someone ask me, what is the MCU? I will clarify for those who do not know what that is. That is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is just all the Marvel movies that are out there. Well, kind of, with exceptions to a few, like X-Men. Those are not part of the MCU. Fantastic Four is also not part of the MCU. So, mostly the Avenger movies, that is the MCU. So, there you go. It's all cleared up for y'all now. So, let's start breaking down Captain America, the First Avenger. So, this movie starts off, I thought that it started off a different way, then I had to go rewatch it. So, it actually starts off with going to Antarctica, where they have found a ship that they have no idea whose it is or what it is. They all thought that it was a weather balloon, and then they're like, well, if it, I don't think you understand. You're going to need one hell of a crane to get this out. And then they find out it is not a weather balloon. It is actually a giant ship that was, flying around, or it's a giant plane, whatever you want to call it. And then they go and they cut a hole into it, and they're like, ooh, what's inside? We gotta look. Then, while they're in there, they find a capsicle. Yes, a capsicle, because it is Captain America in a icicle, frozen in time. I still don't understand the logic of how he survived it, but you know what? They had to make money somehow. So they find him, all they see is the shield, and they sit there and they say, give me a call to the base, Colonel, it's 3 a.m., I don't care what time it is, this one's waited long enough. Then we are taken back in time to 1942, which was right when World War II was going on and the Nazi regime was going and being all powerful in Europe and causing a whole lot of craziness and chaos. So we are introduced to a character by the name of Johann Schmidt. Yes, that is how you say it. It actually translates, I looked it up, it translates to John Smith. I'm pretty sure it wasn't that like the guy from Pocahontas. Like, man, he was a very dark person. Apparently, he was secretly German. But so then we're brought to a church in actually Norway, and that is where we meet Johann Schmidt, and he is actually looking for this thing called the Tesseract. Hopefully, I will be able to get like a little dinging going on for every time the Tesseract is mentioned, because it is mentioned like 6 times throughout the MCU, and you see it 6 times. It is insane. So I am going to try my best to try to get like a little dinging going on in these videos saying, hey, the Tesseract has been mentioned now. Hopefully in later videos I will successfully do that. If you know how to do that and you want to leave it in the comments down below, that'd be lovely. But so we meet Johann Schmidt. He's sitting there in a church looking for the Tesseract. He goes up to this this tomb, sits there and says, "Oh, the Tesseract, the jewel of Odin's treasure room." And then he sits there, shoves the top of the tomb off, looks in it, and he's like, "Oh, this isn't something one buries though." And then he sits there and he drops the replica of the Tesseract, and then he goes over to the wall, and the wall actually has this thing called the Tree of the World. I cannot remember exactly how you say it in German, but he sits there and he goes through I want to say it's a root of it, but it's like a snake. Sits there, pushes the eye in, and out comes the Tesseract. Some people are actually saying that the Tree of the World is actually supposed to be Groot. I don't know. I can't really see it because in the MCU, Groot has never come to Earth, except for in Avengers Endgame. That is the only time he ever comes. Oh, and in Avengers Infinity War, that's the only time he has ever come to Earth. Although in the comics he has made multiple appearances to Earth. I think they say in the comics that the first time he came was to actually destroy Earth, and then he was like, "Oh, these people are interesting," and then decides not to destroy us. Yeah. Then we are brought to New York, where Steve Rogers is actually applying for, I can't remember how many times this is, the first time we see him. I want to say it's probably about the 5th time he's actually applied. Each time he has applied, he has actually said a different place that he lives. He says Bahamas, New Jersey, different places. He's actually from Brooklyn. He says it actually later in the movie that he is from Brooklyn, and he also tells Peter Parker in Civil War that he is from Brooklyn, because he's like, "Oh, you have heart. Where are you from? Oh, Queens. I'm from Brooklyn." And so, but we will go more into that when we get to Captain America: Civil War. That is a lot of movies away, but it's okay. But we first see, Chris Evans, who plays Captain America. It actually was a few other people actually auditioned to be Captain America. It was actually Sebastian Stan, who actually became Bucky, Captain America's best friend, and also Dane Cook, or Dan Cook. I think it's Dane Cook. Auditioned for it. He did not get it. I don't know. I don't know if they ever were like, "No, I don't want you to have a part," or whatever. I was like, okay, what else? Chris Evans was actually called 3 times. These are just fun facts for y'all, because I thought you guys would have some fun, need some fun facts to get you through these movies. But Chris Evans was called 3 times to audition for Captain America. He turned it down 3 times. Then Robert Downey Jr. got on the phone and was like, "Hey, take the job. If this is a really big hit, you can get any job you want." And Chris Evans was like, "Oh my God, what? I'm going to call," and he went and called Marvel up and said, "Hey, is the Captain America position still available?" And they were like, "Yep." And he's like, "Okay, I would like the part." Came in an audition and got the part as Captain America. It's very interesting that it was Robert Downey Jr. who actually had to call him. I want to say Robert Downey Jr. also got Mark Ruffalo to actually come in and be the Hulk in the Avengers. He was actually about to just quit, just be like, "I'm done acting, I'm good," because he actually had some health issues during it. But we will get into that in Avengers, which is, I want to say, 6 movies away, I think, because we will be going down through all 23 of these. So, Then also we are introduced to a skinny, little tiny Chris Evans. That actually is not Chris Evans himself. That is actually his body double. I found that so interesting that he had a body double for this movie. It actually it's his like skinny version body double. And so I guess what they did was the guy who plays him, they just sat there and put like a green screen over his face, and then just sat there and digitally put in Chris Evans' face into it, and had Chris Evans in there mouthing all the words that he was supposed to say, and then put his head on to this guy's body. I thought that was just so weird and bizarre, but like so interesting at the same time, because like who wants to sit there and be like, oh my god, I was Captain America, and then they'll be like, oh, who were you? Oh, I was legit Captain America, but I was like his skinny body double. So, you know, that's kind of cool to go around and say, but I don't know, it seems kind of weird. Uh, yeah. So then we see him applying for the army. He actually is denied because of his health issues. He has like asthma and like all. He has a whole list of them. And the recruiting officer is like, you know what? No, out. You can't. You won't. You'd be ineligible on your asthma alone. Goodbye, out. And he's like, oh, what? And so then he ends up. He randomly goes to the movies. Like, I feel like that's so weird. Like, I'm sad. I'm gonna go to the movies now because I gotta go be sad. And I was like, okay, whatever, man. So while he's at the movies, he actually runs in. I want to say it's someone who actually comes back in later into the movie. I want to say it's actually Gilmore Hodge. I will mention him later in the video of where he comes in. I want to say it actually is him because he looks very, very similar, like the actor who plays him. So they might have done that either on purpose, or it's like, oh, whoops, we did that by accident, and we just really like this guy as acting. So I don't know. But he sits there and he's while he's at the movies, the guy's like sitting there being like, oh, just play the movie, this and that, because they were sitting there showing war propaganda, trying to get people to join the war effort. And he's sitting there just being like totally disrespectful. And then Steve Rogers is like, hey, stop. And then the guy sits there and gets up, and like they end up going into like a back alley, and like the guy ends up like beating the crap out of Steve Rogers, and Steve ends up actually grabbing a garbage can to sit there and use as a shield to kind of help defend himself. That is actually the first time we see him actually use something to shield himself besides an actual shield, because he does use something else in the movie. So he sits there, he beats the crap out of him, and then we meet Bucky, who is Sebastian Stan's character. I think Sebastian Stan did a really, really awesome job in the like all the movies playing Bucky. Yes, I'm gonna break your hearts, or actually like not break your hearts because like it's a happy thing. Bucky does come back into later movies. I will explain that of how it happens and everything. Probably in Captain America: Winter Soldier, I will go more into how he survives it and everything. Whoops. Well, he dies in the movie, but he doesn't at the same time. But we will get there later into this video. But so Bucky comes in, sits there, kind of saves Steve, and is like, "Hey, pick on someone your own size," and then like sits there, just like oddly just kicks the guy in the butt, and the guy's like, "Okay, I'm out," and just leaves. And then he goes over to Steve and is like, "Oh, I think you like getting beat up." And then he finds the like the paper that says that he applied for the army, and he's like, "What?" And looks at it and he's like, "Oh my god, why are you saying you're from New Jersey now?" And then he's like, because Bucky's actually in the army, and so he's like, "Oh, we're gonna go to this World Fair." The World Fair actually does make another appearance in a later movie. It makes a guest appearance in Iron Man 2, but it is no longer called the World Fair. It is actually called the Stark Expo. I don't know. It was very interesting to see that it was almost the exact same thing, but called something different. And so Bucky sits there and tells Steve's like, "Oh, where are we going?" and he's like, to the future. Someone found that and said that is so interesting because at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, Steve actually does go into the future. He ends up getting frozen in time. As I said earlier, that he is a capsule. He gets frozen, and then he ends up coming back like 70 years later. It's very, very interesting that they sit there and he's like, oh, we're going into the future, but Bucky is seen to kind of be like he's staying in the past still. But in later movies, you find out that's not the case. Yeah. Then while they're at the World Fair, and they see Howard Stark for the first time. Howard Stark is actually Tony's father. You actually see a much younger version of him. Way before Tony probably was even a thought in his mind. Because I want to say he was probably about like 20, like late 20s, maybe early 30s by this time. Just living his bachelor life up. And then, and so you see him for the first time. He's sitting there actually introducing a new technology about how a car could fly. I found that so interesting. Like, why don't we look at movies and kind of be like, ooh, let's make that into a real thing of flying cars? That'd be pretty sick. But so then Steve ends up like kind of running off and doing his own thing and goes and applies for, I don't even know, like 6th time, 7th, I don't even know. I lost count of how many times they actually say that he applies, but he goes and applies again. Bucky finds him before he goes to applies, and he's like, "Are you really gonna do this again?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, and he's just like, "Okay, whatever. You go apply again. You're gonna get denied again. Maybe this time you'll finally kind of accept it and be like, okay, yeah, I'm not gonna actually go and be in the war and stuff." So then. This is actually the last time Steve sees Bucky before he actually goes over to fight in the war. And the final words between them is, "Don't do anything stupid." Bucky says, "Don't do anything stupid." Steve says, "How can I? You're taking all the stupid with you." That line is actually very big. It comes back in a later movie for like a different reason why, but it comes back and it's like, oh my god, it pays tribute to Captain America, the first Avenger. I just thought that you all should know of this interesting quote. So then he goes and applies, and while he's there, he meets Dr. Aspen. Dr. Aspen is actually a German scientist who has this crazy idea of making a super soldier serum and wants to create super soldiers who will sit there and kind of fight the wars for them, or help them fight the war. And he sits there and he's like, okay, hey, I see that you are applying. You're like however many time applying. You know what? I'm gonna give you a shot. Let's see what you got. Because I have, but he doesn't tell him quite what he's actually going in for. Of that, he's going to actually be accepted for the super soldier program. And so he's like, okay, you have you're good. You're gonna come over with us and kind of help us. And then he also asks him, do you want to kill Nazis? And he's like, no. And he's like, kind of why do you want to fight in this war? And he's like, I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from. And that's kind of like the true thing of Captain America. Like you see it in almost all the movies. He's just trying to fight the bully and all that. When he fights Thanos is a very big bully in his eyes. He wants to try to defeat him. And so, yeah. Then we jump over to Germany in the Alps, and we are introduced to Dr. Solar. I cannot remember how to pronounce his name exactly, because it's German and they have weird names. But so this is the first time we actually meet him. He actually becomes a very big character later in different movies. He makes little guest appearances. I'm kind of sad that they didn't do what they do in the comics. In the comics, he ends up becoming like a supervillain, as named MODOK, and he's kind of like just a floating head. And I don't know, I would have liked to see that. It would have been interesting how they were going to pull that off in the movies, but they don't. Uh, but then we see Johann Schmidt and Dr. Solar sitting there, like, working on something with the Tesseract, because now that they have the Tesseract, Schmidt can actually do whatever the heck he wanted to do with it. And that actually was to create weapons of mass destruction with them so that he could try to win this war and everything. And Dr. Solar was like, oh yeah, I'm going to help you out. I have some ideas for this. Let's totally bang this thing out. And so then they sit there and you watch them do a test of like trying to convert the energy into a weapon, and they actually successfully do it. And Dr. Solar says, this will change the war. Johann Schmidt says, Doctor, this will change the world. And so, and you know, it does really mostly change the war. It doesn't really change the world as much, but I feel like that was kind of more foreshadowing into later movies of that it would change the world, because it does come back in the Avengers. But we will talk more about how the Tesseract comes back, and how everything like kind of happens. Then we jump back to America. I think it's America. It's not quite definite. I want to say it is 100% America, because Steve comes back in Winter Soldier and is like, hey, I used to live here, because I used to do military training here. I want to say it's actually in New Jersey, and there we actually meet the character of Agent Peggy Carter. She actually is kind of a big part. She is one of the founding members of S.H.I.E.L.D. What S.H.I.E.L.D. is, we will go more into that in the Avenger video. Not the Avenger video, the Iron Man 1 video, since S.H.I.E.L.D. is mostly like introduced then. Although S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of iffy on like the naming, because just different things in different movies. Some people call it S.H.I.E.L.D. in one movie, and then in another movie they sit there and they're like, no, it's this. And so it's kind of like, what is it at the and the movie is supposed to be based like before it, so it's very, very confusing. But so she is actually one of the founding members of it, along with a different character that we meet at the exact same time, which is yes, Colonel Phillips. Colonel Phillips is actually played by Tommy Lee Jones, the guy who played in all the Men in Blacks, except for Men in Black International. That is him. There actually is a callback to the first, I think it's the first Men in Black movie. We will get to that in a minute. But then we rewatch Steve Rogers go through the difficulties of an asthmatic going through military training, because he actually has a really, really hard time, because he just can't really keep up with everyone, and he's kind of in the back of the pack. And Colonel Phillips actually calls him a 90-pound asthmatic, because he is 90 pounds in the movie. Colonel Phillips also states that you do not win wars with niceness, because Dr. Aspen sits there and is like, oh, he's like really, really nice. Maybe that's what we kind of need for the war. And Colonel Phillips is like, no, we don't win wars with niceness, Doctor. We win wars with guts. And right at that moment, he actually throws a dummy grenade into the group of like soldiers that Steve was with and has been doing his training with. And we see like the first act of heroism done by Steve, which is he jumps onto the grenade and he yells to everyone to get back. And because if you jump onto a live grenade, you will actually the impact of the explosion will be kind of diffused a little bit and not affect as many people. And so he jumps right onto it and is like, okay, I'm gonna like kind of let people survive, but you will most likely die. And so he knew that if it was actually a real grenade, he was giving up his life to save all his fellow soldiers. And for that, Dr. Aspen's sister, and he's like, he kind of looks at Colonel Phillips and is like, hey, yeah, look at, he has the guts now too, because he's willing to jump on a live grenade for us and save everyone here. And so he's like, oh, well, he's still skinny. And so it's like, well, because Dr. Aspen sits there and says that he's going to pick Steve for the super soldier program. Colonel Phillips is like, no, I want this dude. I think his name is Hodge. Like I mentioned it before, his name is Hodge. I want to say it's the guy who actually beats him up in the beginning of the movie. He also makes a guest appearance later in the movie. Like it's really just like bizarre because it's kind of to show that like where everyone kind of went after training. And so he sits there and he's like, yeah, you're going to be part of the super soldier program. Experiment program. And then that night, like everyone else kind of like gets shipped off because they're done with training. And so they're kind of told, okay, you're going to go right into war right now. And kind of they ship them off. And Steve stays back to participate in the super soldier program. Then Dr. Aspen actually comes to him that night after he has found out like that he has made the program. And he sits there and he tells him kind of the backstory of Johann Schmidt. Of that, Johann Schmidt is actually the like right-hand man of Adolf Hitler, and that he oversees the Nazi science division, which is called Hydra. I'm pretty sure Hydra is a mythical creature that if you cut off one head, two more will actually take its place, and that is why Hydra's like kind of call is cut off one head, two more shall take its place. Because they are almost everyone yells that out at one point or another. Espen reveals that he actually tried to make the super serum, the super soldier serum before. It kind of went wrong, and Johann Schmidt took it and had negative effects on him. He doesn't really go quite into detail about like what actually went wrong. Later in the movie, you actually find out what really went wrong with him, but it's not like definite of what actually really went wrong. All Aspen tells him is that he was a bad guy, bad became worse, but for a good man, good will become great. And so that is what he is hoping for with Steve, is that because he is a good man, that he will have greatness kind of thrown around. So yeah. Then we jump back to the Alps. This movie is just back and forth between Alps and wherever Johann Schmidt is, back to wherever Steve Rogers is, and is kind of showing like what's going on with both of them. But we go back to the Alps, where there is actually, that's where a like hidden base is for Hydra. There we see a painter actually painting Johann Schmidt, but instead of actually having skin color, he has just red. If you've never seen the movie, you kind of question, why does the guy just have red? We will get to that in a minute. Why is he just painting a red guy when he looked all fleshy and alive? But Dr. Solar comes in and he's like, oh, I hear that you found him, because Schmidt was hunting for Dr. Aspen, because he's like, oh, I don't want him to create another super soldier like me, who's going to be like my downfall and kind of kill me. And so he sits there and he's like trying to find him really quick. And Dr. Solar says, oh, I hear that you found him. And he's like, take a look. And he had like a whole file on it of like, yeah, that he had pictures of him in New York City. And so he's like, yeah, that, and he's like, you want me to give you the order to go like kill him? And he's like, no, it's already been given. So, yeah. Then we go, we're thrown back over into America. I think we are still in New Jersey. It's got to be because the New York senator is there. So it might actually be New York City. When we go back to America, we are seeing Steve Rogers actually riding in a car with Agent Peggy Carter. He actually admits to her in the car that this is the first time he's at the longest conversation he's ever actually had with a woman, and he's actually really really nervous throughout the whole thing, as like any guy really is with any like pretty girl. They're really really nervous about it, and so he sits there and he's like, "Yeah, I'm really nervous," and she's like, "Oh," and he's like, "Well, like asking a girl out on a date always seemed so terrifying," and she's like, "Oh, well, you must have danced." No, I haven't. I've always been waiting for the right partner, and that the right partner kind of comes back, but like not the actual like words. It's just mentioned over and over again of I'm looking for the right partner to kind of dance with. That whoever I dance with, that is my person that I want to be with for the rest of my life. Uh, and so then we get to this antique store. The antique store actually is a secret like laboratory where they are performing the test, well, the experiment. Agent Peggy Carter goes in. She's like, the woman who owns the store says, "Wonderful weather we're having." Yes, but I always carry an umbrella, and that was kind of like the secret code word of like, yeah, I always carry an umbrella. Let me in. Let me go take this person to go get some tests done on him. But so then, he goes down, sits there and is like, "Oh, you got to take off your shirt and all that, all this jazz." Then he goes like into like this little like pod, and in that pod he has the super soldier serum like injected into him. While he's in there, he goes through an extreme amount of pain because he's basically growing muscle in there, well, in the pod. And then when he actually comes out of the pod, I found this fact out. It was so interesting, and I can't I can't watch the movie any way else of after seeing this of like, oh my gosh, it actually is true. The person who plays Peggy Carter, she had actually never met Chris Evans before in her life, like the real muscular guy. She had never met him when she was walking around with the like stunt double of like the body double. She was like, okay, whatever. I don't know who I'm really gonna meet because I haven't ever met this guy. Am I ever gonna meet him? Then when he comes out of the pod, the reason why she's like, oh my god, and is just like in awe by him is because that is the very very first time either both Peggy Carter and the actress who plays Peggy Carter had ever seen Chris Evans, and was just like, oh my god, he's so muscular. Oh my god. Like, you know, the main reason like a lot of girls watch these movies is because, you know, the hot guys. And so she was like, oh my god, I never knew this is Chris Evans. So then she sits there and she's like, here, have a shirt. Then we see an explosion going on. While the explosion is actually going on, we see that Dr. Aspen actually notices the guy who actually sets off the bomb in their like because they had like people viewing it of like, oh, if it is successful, they had like investors that wanted to buy it, and so they let people sit there and watch it, and they're like, okay, this is interesting, I like it, I want to invest. And so then Dr. Aspen sits there and he's like, oh my god, I know this guy, he's actually a Nazi. And they're like, and the guy sits there and he actually shoots Dr. Aspen and ends up killing him. Then the final motion that Dr. Aspen actually does is he sits there and he taps Steve Rogers' like chest to kind of tell him, always be a good man, don't change, don't become like an evil man and stuff like that. Always stay like who you are and who you always have been, type of thing. Then the Nazi guy ends up like sits there and is like, I'm out, runs away. And then Steve actually sits there and he's like, oh, I'm gonna chase after you. He actually runs after him. The guy ends up crashing a car at one point. And with the crashed car, somehow a door goes flying off. Like, I still can't understand like how a door randomly goes flying off, but like whatever. And Steve Rogers actually picks up the car door and uses it as a shield. That is a second time that we see something that is not a shield being used as a shield to kind of call towards he will be getting a shield later in the movie. Then the dude sits there. He actually ends up stealing a vial of this super soldier serum, and is like, "Oh, I'm gonna go give this back to the Nazis, so we can like make more of the like more people like this." And he ends up breaking it because Steve ends up catching him. He's there and he's just about to like start questioning him, like all the like try to get answers. And as he's sitting there trying to get answers out of him, the serum, like the vial of serum, actually breaks. It could have totally been saved, but Steve Rogers was too busy like, I want answers, and he like wasn't like, I'm gonna save this vial. Could have totally like made like a lot more of his like I don't know what to call it, like super soldiers. But then the Nazi ends up sitting there crushing I think it's a cyanide tablet. Actually, it's a tooth. As I think it was actually very, very common in World War II. If there was a spy, they would crush the thing so that they wouldn't get any answers out of them, and they just die. And so this guy ends up sitting there dying. And then then we jump back over to the Alps, where we actually find out Johann Schmidt has been exiled by Hitler himself because he deems him to be too crazy. Because he's sitting there being like, I want to find the Tesseract, and Hitler was like, whoa, man, like just calm down. It might not be real though. And he's like, no, you told me it's real. It's got to be real. So then he like sits there, tries to hunt it down, finds it, and then the people who are kind of like checking on him, because Hitler's sister is like, I want you guys to go check on Johann Schmidt, like see what's he doing, and he sits there, and they go, and they're like, oh, you're like insane because you have like Berlin on a map of places to attack, and he's like, oh yeah, so it is, and he's like, these are my enemies, this isn't the Nazi enemies, and they're like, oh my god, he's gonna like kill us, and so then he ends up sitting there using one of the weapons that he actually, him and Dr. Dr. Solar create via the Tesseract, and they sit there and he ends up like just disintegrating them basically, because they just disappear into a cloud of nothingness. Then we jump back to America, and we find the government only sees Steve as an experiment. And they sit there and they're like, oh, just go back. He has just more tests to run, that he's not really going to be a soldier, that he's just to be seen as an experiment that didn't quite work. Then the governor of New York, no, I lied, it's the senator of New York, sits there and is like, oh, if you want something other than just to be a lab rat, I have something for you. And his job is kind of weird. He ends up becoming like a war bond, like, puppet figure, like because he's just shown as like trying to promote it and trying to get people to buy war bonds, and then also he makes like little movies of like showing like war to kind of get people, and I think all the profits went to war bonds, and also they made like comic books, and that was kind of like to call back to Stanley making the Captain America comics. Because I'm pretty sure he made them during World War II, because he wanted a soldier to kind of get the troops, kind of like, oh my god, look at a soldier, like some weak guy turned into a super soldier, and I'm a soldier, oh my god, and he's sitting here like beating the crap out of the Nazis, and kind of like give them a little bit of like, oh yeah, we can totally do this. Then yeah. Yeah. So then he ends up. It ends up him having to go to Italy, and like do his little skit, if you want to call. I don't know what to call it. Like it's like a little skit, really, of like just his war profiteering stuff in front of a group of soldiers. Actually, in the group of soldiers is Gilmore Hodge again. That is where his next little cameo is like, oh, hey, there he is. Because he's like, oh, nice boots, Tinkerbell, because Captain America's wearing his normal red boots. Then after, he's like, oh, I can't do this, like, and then he ends up running into Agent Carter again. She sits there and she's like, oh, hey, Steve, like, she kind of feels bad because she's like, oh, either to be a lab rat. Your only two choices are either be a lab rat or a dancing monkey. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I feel bad for these guys though, because like they've seen like hell. And she's like, oh, these all the most. They your group was part of the last group of the 107, and the 107 actually was the group, or I don't know what to call, like I want to say it's like a platoon. I don't know exactly what it is that Bucky was part of. And he goes and he's like, oh my god, I didn't see Bucky out. Like he kind of puts it in his head of like, I didn't see Bucky out there. Where is he? Oh my god! And so then he ends up going up to Colonel Phillips, and he's like, have you have you filled out a little like report saying that James Buchanan Barnes is dead? And he's like, I filled out more of these than I care to say, but the name does sound familiar. I'm really, really sorry. And he's like, oh my god, Bucky's like dead. He classified him as dead or a prisoner of war, because almost like there was like a bunch of people who were prisoners of war at this point. So then Steve's like, you know what, I'm gonna go save him. So he ends up starting to get into a Jeep, and Peggy's like, where are you going? And he's like, oh, I'm gonna go save all these people. And she's like, oh, well, I can kind of help. And so she ends up getting Howard Stark to fly him in. He gets, and then he ends up landing in right off the main road, and sits there, beats a few people up, jumps into the back of a car, and is like, yeah, let's go in. I'm gonna be secret-y. And sits there, and he breaks into the compound and is like, oh my god, like let me see like what they're kind of doing here, and kind of like before I go like get all these people out. So then he ends up like finding like an ammo thing of for one of the weapons that they have created from the Tesseract, that the ammo is from the Tesseract, like energy from the Tesseract. And so he's saying, he's like, oh, I'm going to take this for Howard and kind of have him like test this and see like what's up with this. Then he ends up finding a big group of people, ends up breaking them out, more like prisoners of war. And he's like, yeah, let's go. Let's get out of here. Then Steve ends up finding Bucky. While he's finding Bucky, he actually, Jan Schmidt is actually planning to just blow up the compound, basically, because he doesn't really want the American or like any of the allies to come in and be like, hey, look at what they were doing. Oh, we're gonna start using these weapons kind of against them. So he basically just blows up like a lot of weapons, because they couldn't get like all the weapons out, because he was just like, oh, our forces are outmatched. We gotta just like surrender, and like ends up just being like, okay, we're gonna just blow this place up. And so then he ends up Steve finds Bucky and is like, yeah, let's go. We gotta get out of here. And because Bucky's now with all the other like prisoners of war. He's actually part of a different group. They were actually doing tests on him. Those tests actually are more revealed in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, of like what were they actually doing to Bucky, and kind of just a little bit more. Then as Steve and Bucky are trying to leave, Steve runs into Jan Schmidt, and Schmidt sits there and he's like, oh, I don't know what lies Aspen told you, but I was his greatest success. And then he sits there and he reveals that he actually, while he's like looking like a normal fleshy dude like me, he actually sits there and like pulls off this mask, this like fleshy mask, and throws it into the fire, and it's like, no, I'm not a normal human being. And it's like all creepy, like, and reveals that he's actually the Red Skull. So yeah. Then Steve ends up leading all the soldiers, like after like him and Bucky like leave Johann Schmidt ends up like leaving on like this weird like plane thing, and then Bucky and Steve end up like jumping and like getting out, like jumping over like this big like cavern of like just nothingness of like fire, and being like, okay, let's get out of here, man. But then Steve ends up like walking with all the like prisoners of war and is like, yeah, look at what we did. Bam! You thought that I was just an experiment? No, I'm a soldier, man. And so then if you actually look behind him, Steve is actually walking in the front with Bucky right at his side, and then behind him is actually the people who would later be known as the Howling Commandos or Commanders. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it is actually his team of people that he chooses to kind of help him out with all the missions that the government gives him, and it's like, yeah, you got to go do this. Okay, let's go do this. If you look behind him, that's who it is. Then we actually jump back to New York City. We see the senator for New York, and they're wanting to give him a Medal of Honor. Steve is actually not there. This is actually where Stanley's cameo is. He is actually a veteran. And he sits there and he's like, because he's like, oh, Captain America, come out. And this random guy who's coming to tell the senator, like, oh, Captain America can't make it. Stanley sits there and he's like, I thought he'd be taller. I love that cameo because it's like so like weird and funny. Because he's like, oh, I thought he'd be taller, but he's not. He's like really, really short. So then Steve's actually in London. He's sitting there in a like secret office. Sitting there kind of telling the allies like, hey, this is where I saw Hydra was like because they were trying to find like where Hydra's like compounds were, and he's like, oh, I saw like a map of them, here you go. And he's like, oh, well, could you kind of help us out? I think it's Colonel Phillips is there, and he's like, can you help us out wiping Hydra off this map? You created it, can you help us just wipe them out? And he's like, yeah, sure. And he's like, oh, well, I'm putting together a team. And then Steve's like, nah, I'm actually kind of putting together a team too. I like my team a little better. And that's how the Howling Commandos actually become a thing. Yeah. So then we end up going to actually a bar, and he sits there and he talks to the guys, and like, you want to go like join Captain America to kind of get Hydra, and they're like, yeah, sure. And then Agent Carter actually comes in and is like, oh, Howard wants you to come in tomorrow at like 8 to kind of test some new stuff out, and he's like, okay, I'll be there. And then Bucky ends up actually hitting on her, and she's like, no. She kind of like subtly kind of says, no, I kind of like Steve a little bit more, because she's sister, and she's like, oh, why don't we just go dancing? And she's like, I'm waiting for the right partner, and it's kind of like a callback to like him sitting there being like, oh, I'm waiting for the right partner. So then the next morning, we see it of Steve going in to go try the new equipment out. This random woman, I don't even know who she really is. Like, she's like some random person. She sits there and she's like, hey, oh my god, you're like so amazing. And he's like, oh, that's cool. And like, he tries to just brush it off and like, no, I don't really want to be with you. And she's like, I just think you're like so dreamy, basically. And then like she ends up like making him kiss her, and then Agent Carter is like, oh my god. Like, she catches him and she's like, oh my god. And like, just gives him like so much sass about it, like, oh my god, I can't believe you were kissing another woman. I thought we had like this like bond together, but like, I guess not. And he's like, Agent Carter, I'm so sorry. And because while Howard is actually flying him in, he says, Howard says, oh, would you like to go get a late night fondue? And Steve kind of takes it as a sexual innuendo of like, oh, you guys are gonna go fondue. And then he ends up, because he sits there and says to Agent Carter, well, how am I supposed to know that you and Stark aren't fondueing? And she's like, you still don't know a bloody thing about women. I actually love that. I don't know why. I find that like just to be hilarious. And then like Howard sits there and has to explain to him like, no, fondue is just cheese and bread, my friend. And he's like, oh. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, oh. And he's like, I didn't think it was. I thought you were like, he basically sits there and he's like, I thought you were meaning something else. And he's like, oh no, I wasn't. Sorry about that. And I just find the whole like sequence of events like just hilarious. I don't know why. It's like just so stupidly funny. So then Howard starts to show him like all the like new material that he has for him, of like the material that his suit will be made out of. Then he shows him the shield. Like he has like a few different kinds of shields for him, and he's like, nah. And he finds like the one that's like standard issue, and he's like, oh, why? And he's like, oh, this is like the rarest metal on Earth. The rarest metal on Earth to them is vibranium. That actually comes back in a lot of other movies. So keep that in the back of your head of vibranium, because it does come back in Avengers: Age of Ultron and in Black Panther. I want to say it comes back in another movie, but I cannot remember exactly. Fun fact is actually 10 different shields of like the red and white shield that he ends up using for the rest of the movie actually were made. All of them made out of different different like things. They were actually there's like different materials were used for like different things, like depending on what he was using it for. Like when he's like sitting there throwing it, it actually is made out of of plastic or rubber. And then when you see him like for the first time when he puts the shield on his back, that actually is magnetized metal. And so I don't know. I thought that was like a fun fact, interesting for you guys. Then we also then we end up sitting there seeing Steve and the Howling Commandos go in and be like, yeah, we're gonna go beat up Hydra and we're gonna wipe them off this map. While they're actually doing it, someone somehow gets like a camera on them and is like, I'm gonna film you guys. And we actually see the first glimpse of Steve's compass. Steve's compass actually comes back in, I think, a few of the other movies. The compass actually has a picture of Agent Carter in it. She ends up, she actually is seeing the film, and she's like, oh, he has a picture of me in his compass. Like, ooh. It's like so weird. Well, so then we ends up seeing Johann Schmidt's reaction of like, oh my god, you are failing. The American is doing his like just wiping all of us out. Oh my god, we gotta like do something. And like is all like mad and all that. Then we see I want to say it's the Alps again. I'm not 100% sure where they are because they don't kind of give you a hey, this is where we are kind of moment. Like when they go to like Italy, they kind of say hey, we're in Italy now, and it's not like really defined where they are. So then we see that they actually have to go onto a moving train that has Dr. Solar. He's like having to go somewhere really really fast because they stand like oh wherever he's going they really need him, they're going really fast, and Bucky ends up saying to Steve, this isn't you remember when I made you ride the Cyclone at Coney Island? Yeah, is this payback for it? No, why would I ever do that to you? The Cyclone actually makes a like little, it's not really it's kind of like a cameo, but like not really because it comes back in Spider-Man Homecoming. I will actually mention it when we get to Spider-Man Homecoming. Then when they get into the train, they actually Bucky and because it's Bucky, Steve, and another one of the Howling Commandos actually get onto the train. I cannot remember who he actually is, but they sit there and they're like, oh, they get in. For some odd reason, only Steve and Bucky end up getting in to the train, and Steve and Bucky are actually kind of like ambushed and have to sit there and fight. And while they're there, Bucky ends up like getting kind of shot out to the side of the train to a like part that is like broken of the train. And so Bucky's sitting there, and Steve's like, "Oh my god, hold on, I'm coming to get you." And then then Bucky just falls to his death. Because Bucky does come back. It is not the last time we actually see him. Because yeah, if anyone talked to you about any of the Marvel movies, you know that Bucky's actually not dead. Because he comes back. Then Dr. Solar is actually captured and brought back to the, I want to say it's the New York base for questioning, and he sits there and he tells him that Schmidt is actually targeting the world and trying to destroy it. Then while he's saying that he's trying to destroy the world, we actually see this is the first time you see that giant plane that Steve is actually found in at the end at the beginning of the movie. It is actually called the Valkyrie. I found that actually very, very interesting that it's called the Valkyrie, since this is kind of a call to Thor Ragnarok, even though it was not even thought of having Valkyrie in there. It is very interesting that that's what they actually called it, because the Valkyrie were actually a group of, I want to say, female fighters in like Greek mythology, saying that they would fight, fight whoever to kind of protect Odin and the throne. Then we end up seeing Steve kind of trying to deal with Bucky's death. He's actually sitting there trying to get drunk, and he reveals to Agent Carter, like, I can't get drunk. And she's like, oh, well, Aspen did think that was, like, one of the side effects, that you would never be able to get drunk. And he's like, yeah, I can't. Like, I'm kind of, like, depressed about that. Like, I want to get drunk right now. Then you end up seeing him go back, and he's kind of like, okay, I kind of need to man up. I need to get over Bucky's death, and and what I want to do to kind of get over Bucky's death is go wipe out the rest of Hydra and go kill Johann Schmidt. And so we see him back in the London office, and he's sitting there like, okay, we're gonna make a plan. How are we gonna get into Hydra and defeat them? And so then they just make a whole plan of like, oh, we're just gonna knock on the front door and just, destroy them. I love that, like, that's what they think of. Then he ends up jumping, like, going and breaking into another base, like another compound, and ends up purposely gets captured, and he's brought to Johann Schmidt. Johann Schmidt's in there, and he's like, oh, what makes you so special? Why did the serum work on you? It didn't work on me. And he's like, oh, nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn. And he's like, oh my god. Well, my downfall is a kid from Brooklyn. Wow. It's just so bizarre. But so then, the Howling Commandos actually come in and kind of help Steve out in a sticky situation of like, oh, that, like, it was like, I think it was like their whole plan of like that they were gonna come in and kind of help him out. This actually starts the final battle of the movie. Then we sit there and we actually kind of see Schmidt powering up the Valkyrie, and it's kind of like, let's go, we're gonna leave now. Then Steve sits there and he's like kind of running and trying to catch up to the plane, and then he's like, I'm like so slow, I can't catch up. Then Colonel Phillips and Agent Carter end up coming in like Johann Schmidt's car, and is like, let's go. And while they're in there, Colonel Phillips actually sits there and pushes a button with the letter K on it, and the letter K ends up like pushing them forwards. This is actually really, really funny. It's actually a callback to Men in Black, because in it, Tommy Lee Jones, the guy who plays Colonel Phillips, sits there and he's like, he plays the character of K, and he tells his partner Jay, played by Will Smith, he sits there and he's like, oh, don't ever touch the red button. And it's just funny that like he ends up sitting there pushing the red button that says K on it, and it was like totally a callback to it. But so then we go back to it, and right as they're getting close to the wheel, of the plane. Agent Carter's sister pulls Steve in for one final kiss because she didn't know if this was going to be the last time. And then he looks to Colonel Phillips as if he's going to say like something, and he's like, "I'm not kissing ya," and that's like the last words he actually ever says. Then he jumps onto the wheel of the plane and is like, "Okay, let's go fight Johann Schmidt. Let's end this thing." And so then while he's on there, he ends up like fighting a few Nazis and like, yeah, I don't know. It was like a whole weird battle sequence. Then he ends up running into where Johann Schmidt is like chilling, where he's like actually flying the plane, and Johann or Red Skull is like hiding, and he's like, oh, like, oh my goodness, and then Schmidt actually says to Steve, "You could have the power of the gods, yet you wear a flag on your chest and think you are fighting a battle of nations. I've seen the future, Doctor. There is no flags." This quote, I pulled it out just because I think it serves such a significant thing through like later into the MCU when we get to Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War. I think it plays a very, very big part into it. I will go more into it when I go into Endgame and Infinity War, and I will break down of why I think that quote was just so big and like, oh my god, I can't believe they said that, and that they kind of brought it back. I find it also interesting that Steve yells back to him, "Not in my future," because that is actually what his future entails. But we will go more into that in Infinity War and Endgame. Then Steve sits there and he throws a shield at like where the Tesseract's chilling. He ends up messing up the Tesseract, and they're like, "Oh my god!" And then Red Skull ends up like sitting there picking up, and he's like, "What have you done?" And then he ends up like getting like we all thought that he was vaporized. He ends up coming back in later movies, though the actor who plays him was really, really hoping he actually died. Because the actor who plays Red Skull, he absolutely hated the character. He thought that it was like his worst acting ever, and he's like, "I really hope you guys kill me off." And they're like, "No, we're gonna like actually gonna bring you back in a later movie." And he's like, "Oh well, I'm not gonna play him then." And so actually, when we see him in later movies, because he does come back in a later movie, it actually is played by a different character. He actually played on Walking Dead. He played as Aaron on Walking Dead, is the guy who plays Red Skull in the later movies. So then, but with the like vaporizing, we actually are seeing the power of the Space Stone. That is actually, this is the first Infinity Stone we actually ever see in the MCU. That is why the Tesseract is so big, is because it is the first Infinity Stone. And the Infinity Stones, if you have no idea what they are, we will be talking about them in greater length in probably Avengers Infinity War and Endgame breakdown of it all. Then we end up seeing the Tesseract actually burn through the like a hole through the plane, and so it's lost to the ocean. Then Steve is sitting there talking to Peggy and is like, "Oh hey, I got to put this plane down. There's not going to be a safe landing." And she's like, "Oh, well, you got to put it down safely so that because they end up having a date because they set a date of like that they wanted to go on a date with each other." He ends up telling her. This is actually really, really depressing. While falling, he asks Peggy for a rain check on the dance, because that's what they were going to go do, is go dance, because they finally found someone that they wanted to dance with. This is actually really important, the dance of putting a rain check on it, because it does come back in a later movie. Then the plane actually crashes into the Arctic, and that is where we see it in the very beginning of the movie. And Cap is actually presumed as dead for everyone else, like Peggy and Eldon. We actually end up seeing Howard actually attempting to try to find Steve. He can't. He ends up not finding him. I don't know how though, because he's like really searching for him, but like whatevs. Instead, he ends up finding the Tesseract, and they're like, "Oh, look we found like the source of the power of all those weapons." And he's like, "Okay, well, I want to keep going and try to find Steve." And that's like the last time we see Howard in this movie. Then we are brought to present day, or at least present day when the movie came out, which was 2011 actually. We see Steve waking up from a long sleep. He wakes to a record of a game that he actually, to a baseball game that he actually saw in person, and so that's why he kind of actually questions where he is, because he was there in person, so he knows the whole outcome of the baseball game. And this random woman actually walks in. She's actually a nurse, to kind of break the news to him that, like, hey, you've been asleep for 70 years, dude. The scene was actually not supposed to be a nurse. It was actually supposed to be Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson. But then the script was actually later changed to not have Black Widow and actually be just a random nurse. I don't quite know why. I'd much rather have seen Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow in this movie, because I don't know, it would have been a really cool tie-in for all the other movies. But then we end up seeing Nick Fury. If you're watching it as like this is the first movie you're ever watching of the MCU, you have no idea who Nick Fury is. He's actually the head, like one of the head guys of Shield in present day. He's actually played by Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah, he actually because since he played in Pulp Fiction, he actually has a little cameo of Pulp Fiction in the movie, in one of the movies. I will actually talk about that when it comes up, because I thought that was very interesting. And then the final words of the movie actually is Nick Fury sitting there being like, "Are you okay?" And he's just like, and Steve's like, "Yeah, I just had a date." Calling back to Peggy and his date to go dancing with her, which he is now like 70 years late for. And Peggy actually does make a comeback in later movies. And if you actually ever watch the show Agent Carter, I think I only watched the first season of it, because then it kind of just got started to be harder to watch, because they kept changing days of what day it was on and what time it was on, so this was getting really difficult. But so then this movie actually doesn't really have a post-credit scene as like most of the other movies do, which I will actually go into detail about. This one more had a scene directly from the Avengers movie, and then it also had a trailer for the Avengers movie. But so yeah, that is the entire Captain America First Avenger movie, broken down, summarized, and all that good stuff, and interesting facts, and all of that. So if you like this video, I think there's a like button. Hit that down below if you actually liked it. If there was something that like I totally missed and you're like, oh my god, I think it had like a really big part in this movie, you should have said something. Leave it in a comment down below saying what was wrong with it. Also, if you think that I have already started off the MCU like list of how to watch the movies, that it's already wrong, leave it in the comments down below saying how you watch it and all that stuff. If you think that there's something wrong with this video and like, or like you're like, don't even make any more videos, leave it in a comment down below saying just stop. These videos are just stupid and they're going to be stupid. Leave it in the comments down below and I'll take it into consideration, but it probably won't happen. I will probably still be making these videos. And I will try to get the next video out as soon as I can. The next video actually will be Captain Marvel, even though I know it was recently released. It will be the second movie in our breakdown, and we will just continue on with our journey into the MCU. I hope you guys are excited as I am about just breaking all these Marvel movies down and telling you guys all the random junk that I know about these movies and sharing it with all of you. I hope you guys actually find these videos interesting. as I am finding them very interesting, and I'm really, really excited about doing them and sharing them. But so yeah, I will catch you guys on the next video. See ya.